My son thought I lived on the $5,000 he sent me every month. When he saw my rags, my calculating daughter-in-law panicked. My son came to visit me and saw me wearing an old torn coat. "Mom, why don't you buy clothes with the $5,000 I send you?" I looked down, ashamed. "Son, I have to choose between paying my rent or buying my medicine." He turned pale. At that exact moment, my daughter-in-law faked falling down the stairs. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story to the end and comment from which city you are watching. That way, I can see how far my story has reached." My name is Mary, and I am 69 years old. For the past 3 years, I have lived a lie that I can no longer keep up. My son Michael believes I live comfortably with the $5,000 he sends me every month, but the reality is very different. Every day is a battle of choosing whether to pay my rent or buy the medications I need to keep breathing. Last Wednesday morning, while I was mending my winter coat for the 5th time, I heard the familiar sound of Michael's car parking in front of my small apartment. My heart raced. I wasn't expecting his visit, especially not in my current state. I was wearing pants I had bought at a thrift store 2 years ago, covered in patches I had sewn myself using fabric from an old curtain. My sweater had holes in the elbows that I tried to hide by crossing my arms. I ran to the bathroom mirror and tried to make myself look as presentable as possible. My gray hair, which I hadn't been able to get cut in 4 months, fell untidily over my shoulders. I pinched my cheeks to give them some color, but my reflection stared back with the image of a woman who had aged far more than she should have in such a short time. The knocks on the door were soft, but insistent. I took a deep breath before opening it, forcing a smile that I knew didn't reach my eyes. "Mom, what a surprise to see you so." Michael stopped mid-sentence. His eyes immediately fell on my torn coat, my frayed pants, and my shoes that had clearly seen better days. "Son, it's so good to see you," I said, trying to sound cheerful as I stepped aside to let him in. But he didn't move. He just stood there, studying every detail of my appearance as if seeing me truly for the first time. "Mom," his voice sounded strange, tense. "Why don't you buy clothes with the $5,000 I send you every month?" The question hit me like a punch to the stomach. For years, I had managed to keep up appearances during his rare visits. I always managed to put on the best things I had, make sure the apartment looked tidy, and pretend that everything was fine. But this time, I had no time to prepare. I looked down, feeling my cheeks burn with shame. The words got stuck in my throat before they could come out. "Son," I finally whispered, "I have to choose between paying my rent or buying my heart and high blood pressure medications. The $5,000 barely covers the basics." I watched the color drain from his face. Michael stood completely still, as if he had just been slapped. His eyes filled with a mixture of horror and guilt that broke my heart. "What do you mean it barely covers things?" he asked, his voice barely a thread of sound. $5,000 a month should be more than enough for you to live with dignity." I felt the tears starting to form in my eyes. For so long I had wanted to tell him the truth, but every time I tried to call him, Jessica would answer and assure me that he was too busy, that we would talk later. Those laters never came. "Michael, sweetie, the rent for this small apartment is $1,800 a month. My medications cost $900 monthly because, as you know, my basic Medicare doesn't cover everything I need. The electricity, water, and gas bills add up to $500. The most basic groceries cost me at least $600 a month, and that's buying only the absolute essentials." I paused, watching him do the math in his head, his expression growing darker by the second. "That's $3,800 just in basic living expenses," I continued. "I'm left with $1,200 for any emergencies, clothing, or additional medical bills. When I got sick last month and had to go to the ER, the copay was $400. When my refrigerator broke down 2 months ago, the repair cost $300. Michael ran his hands through his hair, a gesture he had made since he was a little boy whenever he felt overwhelmed. I could see all the information processing in his mind, how he was beginning to understand why his mother, who had worked her whole life to give him a good education, now looked like a woman who had lost all her dignity. "Mom, why did you never say anything?" His voice cracked slightly. "I thought you were living like a queen on $5,000. Jessica always told me you were fiercely independent, that you didn't want any extra help from us. There it was again. The name Jessica, my daughter-in-law, who over the last 3 years had become an invisible barrier between my son and me. Every time I tried to contact Michael directly, she would appear with excuses, with stories about how busy he was, with promises that she would pass along my messages that never reached him. Son, I have tried to— My God, Mom, Michael interrupted, his voice heavy with anguish. How have I been so blind? How did I not notice? At that exact moment, we heard footsteps coming up the apartment building stairs. Jessica appeared on the landing, perfectly dressed as always, wearing a cashmere coat that probably cost more than what I spent on groceries in 2 months. Michael, honey, I was looking for you, she said in that sickly sweet voice she always used, but she stopped dead in her tracks when she saw the expression on her husband's face. Jessica, Michael said without taking his eyes off me, did you know how my mother is really living? I saw something shift in Jessica's eyes, a split second of panic that she quickly tried to hide, but I had caught it. After 3 years of observing her, I had learned to read her micro-expressions. What do you mean, babe? She asked, stepping closer, her eyes evaluating the situation. Look at how she's dressed. Michael pointed at my torn coat. Look at this apartment. The $5,000 I send her isn't enough to live decently. Jessica looked around as if seeing my apartment for the very first time. I could see her mind working rapidly, calculating her next move. Oh my God, she gasped, bringing a hand to her chest. Mary, why didn't you tell us you needed more money? We could have. But something about her performance rang false. Her words were right, but the look in her eyes didn't match the surprise she was trying to convey. Michael looked at her with a deep frown. Cut the act. Did you really not know anything? Of course not. Jessica raised her voice, but then completely out of nowhere, she stumbled backward. I feel dizzy. And then, as if in slow motion, I watched her manage to fall down the stairs. But it wasn't an accidental fall. It was entirely too controlled, too dramatic. She made sure not to actually hurt herself, but the noise was loud enough to create absolute chaos. Jessica! Michael yelled, rushing toward the stairs, but I stayed standing in the doorway watching, and in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that my daughter-in-law had just performed the role of her life. The question was, what else was she hiding? Jessica lay at the bottom of the stairs, moaning dramatically while Michael knelt beside her, his face pale with worry. From where I was standing, I could perfectly see how she had managed to land in the least harmful way possible. Her eyes met mine for a fraction of a second, and in that look, I saw something that made my blood run cold, a silent warning. Are you okay, honey? Michael was checking her arms and legs for signs of injury. Does anything hurt? Do you need me to call an ambulance? No, Jessica whispered weakly. I just got dizzy hearing about your mother's living conditions. It's just so shocking. As Michael helped her up, my mind began to connect pieces that had been loose for years. I remembered all the times I had tried to call my son directly, and Jessica answered, assuring me he was in important meetings. I remembered the letters I had mailed to their house that apparently never arrived. I remembered the few times Michael did visit me, and how Jessica always found a reason to cut the visit short. Mary, Jessica's voice sounded weak but firm. I think you should go see a doctor. At your age, sometimes people don't manage their money well. Maybe you need help getting better organized. The insinuation hit me like a slap to the face. She was suggesting, right in front of my son, that I was an incompetent old woman who didn't know how to handle her finances. Jessica, I said with a calm I didn't actually feel, I have managed money my entire life. I worked for 40 years as an accountant before retiring. I know exactly where every single penny of that $5,000 goes. Michael looked back and forth between us, clearly confused by the tension that had filled the air. Mom, maybe Jessica is right. We could find someone to help you make a more efficient budget. I felt my heart break. My own son was doubting my mental capacity, influenced by his wife's subtle manipulations. Michael, I said, walking toward my small dining table. Let me show you something. I opened the drawer where I kept all my receipts, bills, and bank statements meticulously organized. From my years working as an accountant, I had developed the habit of documenting every expense, and that custom had stayed with me into retirement. Here you go, I said, handing him a binder, all my expenses for the last year, organized by month and by category. Michael took the binder with shaking hands. While he reviewed the documents, I watched Jessica. Her face had lost all its feigned softness and now displayed a tense, calculating expression. "Mom, this is perfectly organized," Michael murmured, flipping through page after page of carefully taped and categorized receipts. "Every penny is accounted for." "Because I am not a senile old woman who doesn't know how to handle money," I said, looking directly at Jessica. "I know exactly how much I need to live with dignity, and $5,000 is not enough in this city." Jessica cleared her throat. "Well, maybe we could move you to a cheaper place. There are very nice apartments in the suburbs for half of what you pay here." "The suburbs are 2 hours away from my cardiologist's office," I replied, "and from the hospital where they treat me when I have a crisis. Do you want me to move far away from my doctors at 69 years old? It's just a suggestion." Jessica smiled, but there was pure venom in that smile. Michael closed the binder and looked at me with a mix of admiration and guilt. "Mom, forgive me. I had no idea," I thought. "You thought what your wife told you to think." The words slipped out of my mouth before I could stop them. The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica straightened up, completely abandoning the act of the weak woman who had just tumbled down a flight of stairs. "What is that supposed to mean?" she asked, her voice now cold as ice. "It means that for 3 years, you have been controlling all communication between my son and me. It means the letters I sent him never reached his hands. It means that when I call on the phone, you answer and tell me he's busy, but you never give him my messages." Michael looked back and forth between us, as if watching two strangers fight. "What letters are you talking about, Mom?" I walked into my bedroom and came back with an old shoebox. I opened it and pulled out copies of at least 20 letters I had sent over the last 3 years. "These are copies of the letters I mailed to your address," I said, handing them to Michael. "Letters where I explained my financial situation, where I asked you to increase the monthly amount, where I told you about my health issues." Michael took the letters with trembling hands. His eyes darted quickly from one date to another. "Mom, I never received any of these." "Because your wife made sure to intercept them," I said, feeling years of silent frustration finally finding a voice. Jessica stood up abruptly. "That is a very serious accusation, Mary. I hope you have proof." "I do," I replied, walking over to a small filing cabinet I kept in the corner. From one of the drawers, I pulled out a folder containing postal receipts. "These are the certified mail delivery receipts. All the letters were delivered to your home, Jessica, and according to the postal records, you signed for them." All the color completely drained from Jessica's face. Michael took the receipts and compared the dates with those on the letters. His breathing grew heavy. "Jessica," he said in a hoarse voice, "is this true? You received my mother's letters and never gave them to me?" I don't remember," Jessica stammered, but her voice sounded hollow, lacking conviction. "You don't remember," I repeated, "but you remember perfectly well that I'm a senile old woman who can't manage money." In that moment, something shifted in Michael's expression. I saw him starting to connect dots that had been scattered for years. His eyes hardened as he stared at his wife. "Jessica, I need an explanation, right now." But Jessica no longer looked like the weak, worried woman from a few minutes ago. There was a dangerous determination in her eyes, as if she had decided there was no point in pretending anymore. "Fine," she said, squaring her shoulders. "Yes, I intercepted the letters. But I did it for your own good, Michael. Your mother has always been manipulative, always trying to make you feel guilty so she could get more money. $5,000 a month is more than generous." Manipulative. The word tore from my throat like a muffled scream. Asking for help to buy my heart medication is manipulation? "You always find something to complain about," Jessica continued, her mask now completely off. "There's always a new emergency, a new expense. Michael worked day and night to support you, and you were never satisfied." Michael stood frozen between us, watching his wife as if seeing her for the very first time in his life. "Jessica," I said slowly, "I didn't know he was working day and night because you never told me he had increased his workload to support me. I thought $5,000 was easy for you guys to manage." The trap was closing, and Jessica knew it. Her eyes darted nervously between Michael and me, looking for a way out. Besides, I continued, feeling that I finally had the chance to tell the whole truth, I never asked you for more money in these letters. I was only explaining to my son what my situation was really like. I described my day-to-day life, my worries, my health problems. A mother has the right to tell her son how she feels. Michael opened one of the letters and began to read aloud. My dear son, I hope you are well and that work isn't overwhelming you too much. I am in good health, although the medications are still expensive. Don't worry about me. I know you do everything you can. I just wanted to tell you that I went to the market yesterday and prices have gone up a lot, but I manage fine with what you send. I miss you very much and hope to see you soon. His voice cracked as he finished reading. Mom, this letter isn't asking for more money. You're just telling me about your life. Exactly, I said, feeling tears beginning to roll down my cheeks. I just wanted my son to know how his mother was living. I wanted you to know that sometimes I'm scared of getting sick because I don't know if I'll be able to pay the hospital bill. I wanted you to know that I missed our phone conversations that we don't have anymore. Jessica backed toward the door, but Michael stopped her with a look. Don't leave, he told her. We are not done talking. And I knew we were only just scratching the surface of the truth. The air in my tiny apartment had grown thick, heavy with tension and half-revealed truths. Jessica was cornered against the door, but she still maintained that defiant expression I had come to know so well. Michael held my letters with shaking hands, and I could see how every word he read opened his eyes to a reality that had been hidden for years. Jessica, Michael said, his voice strangely calm, I need you to explain to me exactly why you decided my mother had no right to communicate with me. I already told you, she replied, though her voice had lost all the softness she normally reserved for him. I did it to protect you. Your mother has always been, always. I interrupted her, feeling a cold fury taking over. Jessica, you didn't even know me before you married Michael. The few times we met before the wedding, you were perfectly lovely to me. Michael turned to his wife, his brow furrowed. That's true. Before we got married, you always spoke highly of my mom. You said she was a strong, independent woman. People change, Jessica muttered, but it didn't sound convincing even to her. Yes, I said, taking a step toward her. People change, especially when they get what they want. Right then, I remembered something that had been buried in the back of my mind for years, a conversation I had accidentally overheard during Michael and Jessica's wedding reception. I had gone to the restroom, and on my way back, I heard voices in the hallway. Jessica was talking to her younger sister. Jessica, I said slowly, do you remember what you told your sister Chloe on your wedding day? I saw her eyes widen slightly. I had hit the nail on the head. I don't know what you're talking about, she replied, but her voice sounded strained. Michael, I said, turning back to my son. On the day of your wedding, I overheard your wife telling her sister that now that you were married, she would make sure you had fewer family distractions so you could focus on making money. Michael stood perfectly still. What? Jessica told Chloe that I was too emotionally dependent on you and that it affected your productivity at work. She said she would handle the situation so you could focus entirely on your career. That's not... Jessica started to protest, but Michael cut her off. Is that true, Jessica? Did you say that? Jessica's silence was more revealing than any confession. Michael dragged his hands down his face, clearly overwhelmed by the revelations piling up one after another. But there's more, I continued, feeling that I finally had the chance to unleash years of silent suspicions and observations. Michael, did you ever wonder why Jessica always knew exactly when you were coming to visit me? My son looked at me, confused. What do you mean? Every time you visited me these last 3 years, Jessica would show up, as if by chance, 30 or 40 minutes later. She always had a perfect excuse that she was out running errands in the area, that she had gone to see a friend nearby, that she was just coincidentally driving through the neighborhood. Michael began to nod slowly, recognizing the pattern I had described. Do you know how many coincidences like that exist? I continued. I also noticed that the few times I managed to speak with you directly on the phone, Jessica would always interrupt the conversation after a few minutes. There was always an emergency. You always urgently needed to be somewhere. Michael works very hard, Jessica protested weakly. It's normal for him to be busy. Yes, He works very hard, I said. But did you know he also worked very hard to be able to send me more money? This time, it was Michael who was left speechless. Jessica paled visibly. What do you mean? Michael asked. I walked over to my nightstand and pulled out a folder I had been keeping for months, waiting for the right moment to open it. Inside, I had bank statements and documents I had obtained with the help of my neighbor, Rose, who worked at the bank. Michael, I said, handing him the documents. These are the records of the wire transfers you've sent me over the last 3 years. My son took the papers and began looking through them. His eyes darted quickly from one line to the next, and I could watch his expression shift gradually from confusion to disbelief. Mom, he said in a raspy voice, this says that the first year I was sending you $5,000 a month, but the second year the transfers went up to $7,500 a month. And this last year, it says I've been sending you $10,000 every month. I felt my stomach turn to ice. Michael, I have never received more than $5,000 a month. Jessica had gone completely rigid against the door. Michael looked at her with an expression I had never seen on him before, a mixture of betrayal, absolute horror, and contained fury. Jessica, he said in a dangerously low voice, where is the other $5,000 a month that I've been sending my mother for the last year? I don't know what you're talking about, Jessica stammered, but her hands were shaking visibly. And the additional $2,500 from the second year, I added, feeling all the puzzle pieces finally locking into place. Michael took a step toward his wife, the documents gripped tightly in his fist. Jessica, I am looking right here and seeing that over the last 3 years, I have given you a total of $270,000 to send to my mother. But according to her receipts, she has only received $180,000. The math was devastating. Jessica had siphoned off $90,000 that was meant for my livelihood. That means, I said, my voice trembling with righteous anger, that you have stolen $90,000 from me. Money my son worked day and night to send me. Money I needed for my medication. To live with dignity. It's not stealing. Jessica finally exploded, her entire mask of the devoted wife vanishing completely. I was saving that money for our future, for when Michael retires. I was being responsible. Responsible! Michael roared. Responsible is letting my mother live in poverty while you hoard money that was specifically meant for her? Your mother isn't starving to death, Jessica yelled back. She has a roof over her head. She has food. $5,000 is more than what a lot of people have. $5,000 is not enough to live decently in this city. And you knew it, I said, feeling years of silent humiliation morphing into fierce justice. That's why you intercepted my letters. Because you knew that if Michael found out about my real situation, he would increase the money he sent. And she was right. Jessica turned to Michael. Look at what happened. The minute you found out, you immediately increased the amount. I knew this would happen. Of course I increased it, Michael shouted. Because my mother was living in undignified conditions while you pocketed the money I worked to send her. Jessica realized she had revealed too much. Her breathing became erratic, like a cornered animal searching for a way out. Michael, honey, she suddenly changed her tone, slipping back into that sickly sweet voice she had perfected over the years. I just wanted to secure our future. You work so hard, you deserve to have financial security when you're older. At the expense of my mother's dignity? Michael stepped closer to her, letting my 9-year-old mother choose between her heart medication and buying decent food? Besides, I added, feeling it was time to reveal the final piece of the puzzle. Where is that money now? Jessica, because if you were really saving it for your future, it should be in a joint account that Michael can see. The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica looked down at the floor, unable to meet our eyes. Jessica, Michael's voice was now dangerously calm. Where is the money? It's invested, she whispered. Where? In different things. Michael stepped so close to her I could see her eyelashes trembling. Jessica, did you buy something with that money? Finally, the walls came crashing down entirely. Jessica lifted her head, and in her eyes, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. She didn't even feel genuine remorse. I bought a few things we needed, she said in an oddly calm voice. I remodeled our house, bought the new car, invested in my sister's business, set money aside for our vacation to Europe. Michael recoiled as if he'd been slapped. A European vacation. A house remodel. All of that with my mother's money. With our money, Jessica corrected. It was our money, Michael. You gave it to me to manage. I gave it to you to send to my mother, he yelled. In that moment, something permanently broke in that room. Not just the trust between a husband and wife, but the entire structure of lies Jessica had carefully built over the years. And as I watched my son process the sheer magnitude of his wife's betrayal, I knew this was only the beginning. The complete truth was still waiting to see the light of day. The atmosphere in my small apartment had fundamentally changed. What started as a surprise visit had turned into an impromptu courtroom where 3 years of lies were being unearthed one by one. Jessica was no longer pretending to be the concerned, devoted wife. Her mask had fallen so completely she looked like a different person. Michael sat heavily on my old sofa, his head in his hands. The bank documents were scattered across my coffee table like evidence of a crime that had finally come to light. $90,000, my son mumbled, his voice barely audible. $90,000 that I worked day and night to send to my mother, and you blew it on vacations and renovations. Michael, please. Jessica reached out toward him, but he held up a hand to stop her. No, he said without looking up, do not come near me right now. I remained standing by the window, watching my son process the gravity of the betrayal. I had waited for this moment for years. I had dreamed that someday the truth would come to light, but now that it was actually happening, it hurt me deeply to see the suffering on Michael's face. Do you know what hurts the most? Michael finally said, looking up to meet Jessica's eyes. It's not just the money. It's that for 3 years, you made me believe I was a good son. You told me how proud you were of me for taking such good care of my mother. Jessica opened her mouth to reply, but Michael wasn't finished. You praised me for being so generous, so responsible. When I came home exhausted after working overtime to get the extra cash for Mom, you greeted me with a smile and told me how wonderful I was. All this time, you knew my mother was suffering. Your mother wasn't suffering, Jessica responded defensively. She was living within her means. Within my means? I turned to her, feeling indignation giving me strength I didn't know I had. Jessica, last month I had to choose between buying my blood pressure pills or paying the electric bill. I spent 3 days without power because I chose my medication. I saw Michael flinch hearing this. The month before, I continued, I passed out in the grocery store because I hadn't eaten in a day and a half. I was trying to stretch my grocery budget until the end of the month. Enough, Jessica screamed. I can't listen to any more of this emotional manipulation. Manipulation? Michael stood up sharply from the couch. You call this manipulation? Yes, Jessica spun to face him, her eyes blazing with fury. This is exactly what I wanted to avoid. Your mother using guilt and drama to squeeze more money out of you. Jessica, I said, my voice eerily calm. My son knew absolutely nothing about this until today. How could I be manipulating him if, for 3 years, I couldn't even speak to him? That question left her speechless for a second. Michael looked back and forth between us, and I could see how every revelation pushed him further away from the woman he had been married to for 5 years. Furthermore, I added, I want you to explain something to me. If you truly believed I was manipulative and that $5,000 was plenty, why didn't you just say that honestly to Michael? Why intercept my letters? Why lie about the amounts he was giving you for me? Jessica stayed quiet, but I could see her mind working furiously, searching for a justification that might sound credible. Because I knew he would let himself be manipulated, she finally said. Michael is too nice, too generous. I knew that if he read your letters full of complaints and theatrics, he'd give you whatever you asked for. Theatrics? Michael stepped toward her, his voice dripping with disbelief. You call it theatrics that my mother told me about her day-to-day life? That she told me she missed our conversations? I walked to the table where I had left the letters and picked one at random. Michael, I said, let me read you another one of these letters full of theatrics and manipulation. I opened the envelope and read aloud. My dearest son, today was a beautiful day. I went for a walk in the park and saw a young family having a picnic. It reminded me of when you were little and we used to go to the park on Sundays. I hope you are eating well and getting enough rest. Don't work too hard. Your health is more important than anything. Sending you all my love, Mom." I finished reading and looked at Jessica. "Where is the manipulation in that?" Jessica didn't answer. Michael took the letter from my hands and read it again, this time silently. When he finished, his eyes were full of tears. "Mom," he whispered, "I remembered those Sundays at the park too. I missed them, but I thought you were too busy enjoying your new life with the money I was sending." New life. I sat on the edge of my bed, suddenly feeling the full weight of my 69 years. "Michael, my life didn't change when you started sending me money. It just became possible. Before that, after I retired, I was living entirely on my small Social Security pension." "How much is your pension, Mom?" $1,200 a month, I replied. "After 40 years working as an accountant, my pension is $1,200 a month." I watched Michael do the mental math. "That means, before I started helping you, you were living on $1,200 a month in a city where the cheapest rent for seniors is $1,300. I finished the sentence for him. My God. Michael dropped back onto the sofa. "How did you survive?" "Sometimes I didn't survive very well," I admitted. "There were months when I didn't pay the full rent, months when I ate nothing but bread and water. That's why when you started sending me help, I thought I could finally live with a little bit of dignity." Jessica had been listening to the entire conversation with an increasingly annoyed expression. Finally, she exploded. "This is ridiculous," she yelled at Michael. "She's exaggerating. Nobody lives on just bread and water." "Do you want to see the grocery receipts from that time?" I asked calmly. "I have those saved too. I don't need to see anything else." Jessica headed for the door. "I am tired of this self-pity show." But Michael stepped between her and the exit. "No," he said, with a firmness he hadn't shown all afternoon. "You are not leaving until you explain exactly what you did with my mother's money. I already told you. You told me you blew it on remodels, a car, vacations, and your sister's business. I want details. I want to know exactly how much you spent on each thing." Jessica crossed her arms, clearly resenting the interrogation. "The house remodel cost $35,000, she finally spat out. "The new car was $42,000. I loaned my sister $10,000 for her bakery business." Michael calculated mentally. "That's $87,000, but the money you siphoned was exactly $90,000. "There were minor expenses," Jessica muttered. "And the European vacation you mentioned?" Jessica hesitated. We paid for that with our personal money." "Our personal money." Michael stared at her in disbelief. "Jessica, I have been working 6 zero-hour weeks so I could send extra cash to my mother. Where exactly did we get personal money for a European vacation?" The silence that followed was telling. Jessica realized she had dug herself into another hole. "Jessica?" I said softly. "You used part of Michael's money to fund that vacation." "Stop it!" she shrieked. "I am not going to stand here and be interrogated like a criminal." "You are a criminal," Michael said, his voice cold as ice. "You stole $90,000 that wasn't yours. I am your wife. It was our family's money. It was money specifically meant for my mother." Michael stepped right up to her. "Money I worked day and night to earn, explicitly telling you it was for Mom's livelihood. And she was well provided for with $5,000. $5,000 is not enough. And you knew it," Michael shouted. "That's why you intercepted her letters. Because you knew if I found out her true situation, I'd demand answers." Right then, Jessica completely changed strategies. Her eyes welled with tears and her voice turned pleading. "Michael, honey, please. I know I messed up, but everything I did was thinking about us, about our future together. I wanted us to have a beautiful home. I wanted us to enjoy life." But Michael was no longer the same man who had walked into my apartment that morning. The revelations of the past few hours had changed him irreversibly. "Do you know what I wanted?" he told her. "I wanted my mother to live with dignity in her final years. I wanted to be able to sleep peacefully, knowing she was well taken care of. I wanted to honor everything she sacrificed for me when I was a kid." He turned to me, tears in his eyes. "Mom, forgive me," he whispered. For 3 years, I thought you were an independent senior enjoying a comfortable retirement thanks to my help. For 3 years, I patted myself on the back for being a good son. You are a good son, I told him, stepping forward to take his hands. This isn't your fault. Yes, it is, he said, his voice breaking. I should have come to see you more often. I should have insisted on speaking with you directly. I should have questioned why Jessica always had to be the middleman. Jessica watched us both with a mix of frustration and something that looked like desperation. Michael, she tried once more, we can fix this. I can pay the money back. We can sell some things. Michael looked at her for a long moment, then spoke with a calm that was far more devastating than any shouting. Jessica, he said, it's not just the money. It's that for 3 years, you slept soundly, knowing my mother was choosing between her medicine and food. It's that you intercepted letters where a 6, 9-year-old mother poured her heart out to her son about her loneliness. It's that you lied to my face every single day for 3 years. Jessica opened her mouth to argue, but Michael held up a hand. No, he said, I don't want to hear any more lies. And at that moment, I knew my son's marriage was over. But something told me Jessica wouldn't give up without a fight. The following days were an emotional roller coaster I never thought I'd have to ride at 69. Michael had walked out of my apartment that Wednesday, a broken man, taking with him all the lies his marriage had been built upon. Jessica had followed him out, screaming promises to change and explanations that no one wanted to hear anymore. I thought that was the end of the nightmare, but I was so very wrong. On Friday morning, my phone rang early. It was Michael, and his voice sounded strained, almost shattered. Mom, he said without any preamble, I need you to come to the house. I found something you need to see. What kind of something? I asked, though a part of me dreaded the answer. Documents. His voice cracked slightly. Documents that Jessica had hidden about you. I felt my stomach turn to ice. What kind of documents? I can't explain over the phone, he said. Please, Mom, can you come over? I'm sending an Uber. An hour later, I was standing in front of the house my son shared with Jessica. It was a beautiful, elegant home with a perfectly manicured lawn and an imposing entrance. As I walked up to the front door, I couldn't help but think about the $35,000 Jessica had blown on renovations. My money. The money Michael had worked day and night to send me. Michael opened the door before I could even ring the bell. He looked terrible. Deep bags under his eyes, uncombed hair, wrinkled clothes as if he had slept in them. Where is Jessica? I asked as I stepped inside. She went to her sister's house last night, he replied. Said she needs time to think. And are you okay? My son looked at me with an expression that shattered my heart. No, Mom, I'm not okay. But after what I found last night, I'm doing much worse. He guided me to his home office, a space that had always been his personal sanctuary. The desk was covered in papers, folders, and documents scattered around like evidence in a frantic investigation. After Jessica left, Michael started. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything that happened, all the lies. So I decided to go through our financial records to understand exactly what she had done with the money. He walked over to the desk and picked up a thick folder. But then I found this, he said, handing it to me. It was hidden in the very back of her desk drawer, behind some other files. I opened the folder with shaking hands. What I saw inside knocked the wind out of me. The first page was an internet printout of assisted living facilities, but not nice or comfortable ones. They were the most basic, cheapest ones you could find in the state. Keep reading, Michael muttered. The second page was a handwritten list in Jessica's neat handwriting. The header read, Options for M, clearly referring to me. There were 5 nursing homes listed with addresses, monthly rates, and margin notes. Sunset Manor, $1,200 a month, perfect, far from the city. Golden Years Care, $1,500 a month, good option, limited visiting hours. Peaceful Rest, $1,900 a month. Cheaper, very basic conditions. I felt my knees give out. Michael helped me sit down in a chair. There's more, he said hoarsely. I kept turning the pages. The next one was a partially filled out legal document, a petition for conservatorship over an elderly adult with diminished mental capacity. My name was typed at the top. Jessica was planning to declare you mentally incompetent, Michael said, his voice heavy with horror and rage, and get legal guardianship over you so she could lock you away in a nursing home. The pages blurred through my tears. Why? I whispered. Why would she do something like this? Because. Michael grabbed another folder off the desk. I also found this. This folder contained documents about my small property, the little house I had lived in before moving to the apartment, the one I had been renting out for the past 5 years for a tiny extra income. Jessica looked into your property, Michael said. She has documents showing the house is worth about $200,000 now because of gentrification in the neighborhood. I took the papers with trembling hands. Sure enough, there were property appraisals, market analyses, everything meticulously researched. But there's more, Michael continued, his voice growing tighter. Look at this. He showed me an email draft Jessica had typed up but apparently never sent. It was addressed to an elder law attorney. The email read, "My husband is extremely worried about his 9-year-old mother. Lately, she has been showing signs of mental confusion and financial mismanagement. She blows through the $5,000 a month he sends her and is always demanding more money for expenses she cannot clearly explain. She also owns a property that she is not managing properly. We need advice on how to protect her from herself and ensure she receives appropriate care. The family is exploring long-term care options." I was speechless. The manipulation was so elaborate, so calculated, it made me dizzy just thinking about it. "Do you realize what this means?" Michael asked. "Jessica wasn't just stealing the money I sent you. She was building a legal case to declare you incompetent, stick you in the cheapest nursing home she could find, and seize control of your property. But I haven't shown any signs of mental confusion," I protested. "My financial documents are perfectly organized. My doctor can testify that I am completely mentally competent." "I know," Michael said. "But Jessica was creating a narrative. She intercepted your letters, so I would never see proof of your mental sharpness. She would tell me you sometimes sounded confused when you spoke to her on the phone. She even mentioned a few times that she was worried you were developing memory problems. I remembered all those uncomfortable conversations with Jessica when she would ask me bizarre questions or seem to be deliberately trying to confuse me. She was documenting every interaction with you," Michael continued, "building a dossier of supposed mental incompetence." I kept flipping through the documents. There were detailed notes about our rare phone calls, all twisted to make me sound disoriented or irrational. April 15. M. Called asking for Michael. Seemed confused about what day it was. May 3. M. Mentioned she paid rent twice this month. Possible financial confusion. June 12. M. Couldn't remember speaking to me the week before. "All these notes are lies," I said, feeling violated in a way I had never experienced. "I never said any of these things." "I know." Michael sat heavily in his chair. "But if a judge saw these notes, combined with the fact that you supposedly couldn't properly manage your finances on $5,000 a month, she could have built a highly convincing case." I kept going through the files, every page revealing a new layer of betrayal. There was research on various facilities, price comparisons, even maps showing which ones were furthest from where Michael lived. "Once she had legal guardianship over you," Michael said, "Jessica could have locked you up in the cheapest home, sold your property, and managed all that cash however she pleased." "How long was she planning this?" I asked, though I was terrified of the answer. Michael checked the dates on the papers. "The oldest documents are dated 2 years ago," he said. "This wasn't some recent idea. She has been plotting this for the majority of our marriage." I felt a fury so intense that for a moment I couldn't breathe. 2 years, I repeated. "For 2 years she has been plotting to steal my freedom, my dignity, my home. And the worst part," Michael added, "is that she would have made me an accomplice. The plan was for me to sign the conservatorship papers as the concerned son. She would have orchestrated the whole thing, so it looked like it was my idea, like I was the one trying to protect you." "Would you have signed?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from the look on his face. "If she had presented this perfectly, if she had convinced me you were truly losing your mental faculties." He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "You would have signed, 'I finished for him,' because you trusted her." Michael nodded miserably. "Mom, For 5 years, I trusted her with my life, my decisions, my relationship with you. If Jessica had come to me with these fake notes, with stories about your mental confusion, with manufactured proof that you couldn't care for yourself, I would have believed her. Because you are a good man, I said. Because it would never cross your mind that someone could be so calculatingly evil. But it doesn't end there, Michael said, picking up another document. Look at this. This was a draft of a will. My will, apparently, even though I've never seen this document in my life. In that forged will, I supposedly left my property and all my assets to Michael, but with Jessica acting as the executor of the estate, due to my complete trust in her financial judgment. She was planning to forge your will too, Michael said, to make sure that even after your death, she would maintain control over whatever money was left. I sat in silence for several minutes, processing the sheer magnitude of what I had discovered. It wasn't just theft. It wasn't just lying. It was an elaborate scheme to strip me of my autonomy, my dignity, and eventually, my entire life. Where is Jessica now? I finally asked. At her sister's place, like I said, Michael answered. But she's coming back tomorrow. She wants to talk about our future. And what are you going to tell her? Michael looked at me with a fiery determination I hadn't seen in him since he was a teenager fighting for his dreams. I'm going to tell her it's over, he said. I'm going to show her all these documents, and I'm going to tell her I know exactly what kind of person she is. And then, he said, standing up from his chair, I am going to make sure she can never hurt anyone like this ever again. For the first time in days, I felt a spark of hope. My son had finally seen Jessica for who she truly was. But something told me Jessica wouldn't go down without a fight. And I was right. On Saturday morning, Michael called me early again. His voice sounded different, stronger this time, more resolute. Mom, Jessica is coming to the house at 2 p.m. to talk. I want you to be here. Are you sure? I asked. Maybe it's better if you two talk alone first. No, he said firmly. This is about you, and you deserve to be present when she faces the consequences of what she did. At exactly 12 noon, I was sitting in Michael's living room when Jessica walked through the front door. She looked flawless, as always. Perfectly styled hair, precision makeup, elegant clothes. But when she saw me sitting on the sofa, her composure slipped for a second. What is she doing here? She demanded, talking to Michael as if I couldn't speak for myself. She is here because this conversation directly involves her, Michael replied, his voice cold and controlled. In fact, almost everything we are going to discuss is about her. Jessica sat down in the armchair across from us, crossed her legs with calculated elegance, and forced a smile. Michael, honey, I've been thinking a lot these past few days. She started in that honeyed voice she had perfected, and I think we can fix all this. I know I made a mistake managing the money. But Jessica, Michael cut her off. Before you say another word, I want you to see something. He stood up and returned with all the folders we had gone through the day before. He placed them carefully on the coffee table, arranging them like exhibits in a trial. What is this? Jessica asked, but I could see her face starting to drain of color as she recognized her own files. These are the plans you had for my mother, Michael said, opening the first folder. The documents I found hidden in your desk. Jessica sat perfectly still. Her eyes darted rapidly over the papers spread across the table, calculating exactly how much had been discovered. Michael, can you explain why you researched nursing homes to lock my mother up in without consulting me? He asked, keeping his voice dangerously steady. Can you explain why you drafted conservatorship papers to declare her mentally incompetent? I was worried about her well-being, Jessica stammered. I thought maybe she needed more care than she could provide for herself. Worried about my well-being? I stood up from the sofa, feeling stronger than I had in years. Jessica, you were worried about my $200,000 property. Jessica glared at me with pure hatred, no longer bothering to fake concern. I don't know what you're talking about. Michael picked up the property documents. No? Then why did you have detailed appraisals of my mother's house? Why did you research its current market value? It's normal to look into family assets, Jessica snapped, but her voice lacked conviction, even to her own ears. And what is this? Michael shoved the draft of the forged will at her. Is it also normal to forge a family member's last will and testament? Jessica stood up sharply, abandoning all pretense. Fine. Yes. I looked into her assets. Someone had to be realistic about the future. Realistic, I said, stepping closer to her. Realistic is plotting to rob me of my freedom and my home. Your freedom? Jessica let out a bitter laugh. Mary, you are 69 years old. You live alone in a decrepit apartment. You can barely cover your basic expenses. You have no family nearby except for Michael, who works day and night. I work day and night because of you, Michael growled. I work 60 hours a week so I could send extra money that you stole. It was for our future, Jessica screamed back. That was money we could have used to build a better life. Instead, it was all going to some old woman who's going to live, 10 more years, Max? The silence that followed that statement was absolute. Michael stood there, as if he had been struck. Did you just say my mother is going to live 10 more years, Max? He asked, his voice deathly quiet. Jessica realized she had gone entirely too far, but it was far too late to take it back. It's the reality, Michael, she said, trying to sound reasonable. People her age don't live forever. That money could have been used to secure our future for the next 30 or 40 years. So your plan was to speed up her death by locking her in the cheapest nursing home you could find, Michael said, so you could get your hands on her money faster. That's not true, Jessica protested, but the fight had left her voice. Yes, it is, I said, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. I reviewed the facilities you researched. Sunset Manor, where you wanted to dump me, has a terrible reputation. 1-star online reviews, multiple complaints of medical neglect, inadequate food, lack of supervision. It made the most financial sense, Jessica muttered. It was the cheapest, I corrected. $1,200 a month. Less than what my son originally sent me. You would have saved money keeping me there until I died. Michael stepped toward Jessica, and for the first time since I'd known her, she backed away from him in fear. For 5 years, he said, I slept next to a woman who was planning to slowly murder my mother. That's a lie, Jessica shrieked. I am not a murderer. No? I asked. Jessica, your plan was to declare me mentally incompetent based on absolute lies, shove me into an inadequate facility where I'd receive substandard care, isolate me from my son so he couldn't visit regularly, and just wait for neglect and decline to do the rest. Not to mention, Michael added, forging her will to ensure that even after her death, you retained total control of her assets. Jessica looked between us, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. She realized there was no way out of this. What do you want from me? She finally asked. First, Michael said, I want you to return every single penny of the $90,000 you stole. I don't have all that money lying around, Jessica protested. It's tied up in the house, in the car. Then sell whatever you have to sell, Michael shot back. Sell your new car, take out a loan, borrow from your family, I don't care how you do it. Second, he continued, I want you to hand over every single document you've compiled on her, all your fake notes, all your research, everything. And if I don't? Jessica asked defiantly. Michael smiled, but there was nothing pleasant about it. Then we will call the police and press charges for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. Kidnapping? Jessica turned even paler. Conspiring to institutionalize someone against their will using forged documents constitutes kidnapping, I told her. My neighbor Rose has a grandson who's a lawyer. We already consulted him. Jessica slumped back into her chair, finally grasping that she had lost everything. You have 48 hours, Michael said, to come up with the money and hand over the files. After that, we go straight to the police. And our marriage? Jessica asked weakly. What marriage? Michael replied, I'm married to a stranger. The woman I thought I knew never existed. Jessica stood up slowly, grabbed her purse, and walked to the door. Right before she left, she turned back one last time. Michael, she sneered, you're going to regret this. Your mother is going to die soon anyway, and then you'll be all alone. My son looked at her with pure, unadulterated disgust. I would rather be alone than spend another second with someone capable of what you planned. Jessica stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Michael and I stood in silence for several minutes. Is she really going to pay the money back? I asked eventually. She's going to try not to, Michael replied, but I already spoke to my lawyer. We have more than enough evidence to prove fraud. If she doesn't return the funds voluntarily, the courts will force her to. And the divorce is already in motion, he added. My lawyer says that with all this hard evidence of fraud and conspiracy, she likely won't be entitled to a single dime of our marital assets. 3 weeks later, Jessica had wired $85,000 into an account Michael opened specifically for me. She managed to come up with the remaining $5,000 by selling some personal items and jewelry she had bought with my stolen money. The divorce moved swiftly. Jessica didn't fight the division of assets because she knew any deep financial investigation would just uncover more fraud. She moved back in with her family out of state. Michael downsized to a smaller apartment closer to mine. We now have lunch together every single day. And for the first time in years, I can call my son whenever I want without middlemen, without filters, without lies. With the recovered money, I was able to move into a larger, much more comfortable apartment. I bought a solid health insurance plan that completely covers my medications. I bought some new clothes, decent furniture, and even treated myself to a small vacation. But the most important thing I got back wasn't the money. It was my dignity, my freedom, and my relationship with my son. Sometimes I think about Jessica and wonder if she ever feels any remorse for what she did. But then I remember that anyone capable of so meticulously plotting the destruction of another human being probably lacks the capacity for true regret. A few days ago, Michael asked me if I could ever forgive her. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, I told him. Nor does it mean that what she did was okay. It just means I am no longer giving her power over my life or my emotions. So have you forgiven her? He asked. I have evicted her from my mind, I replied. But more importantly, I have freed myself. Now, when I wake up every morning in my safe, comfortable apartment, when I take my medication without stressing over the price tag, when I call my son and he picks up on the very first ring, I feel something I haven't felt in years: peace. Jessica thought she could steal my future, but what she failed to understand is that my future never relied on money. It relied on my dignity, my self-respect, and the genuine love of my son, and absolutely no one can ever take that away from me. In my 69 years, I've learned that life can deal you some brutal blows, that the people you trust most can betray you, that the most perfectly laid plans can crumble. But I've also learned that the truth always comes to light, that justice may be delayed, but it always arrives, and that it is never, ever too late to reclaim your life. I now live every day as the gift that it is, surrounded by my son's true love and the absolute peace of mind, knowing that no one else will ever decide how I spend my final years. And that is the greatest victory of all.